Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at today. We are going to be talking about laboring and birthing positions. I always like to assume that the baby's head is the key and your hips are a lock, and together they have to work perfectly so that the baby can descend. And so a lot of times when labor stalls or there are complications, it's often due to positioning or like positioning of the baby's head and or hips or maybe the size of the head and so on and so forth. But there are things that we can do to help, one, speed up labor, and two, help baby descend through your body and down the canal. So I like to think of the acronym BLT. So B is for being open, L is for leaning forward, and T is for trusting gravity. Do you want to feel more comfortable? Move your body. Do you want a shorter labor? We move our body. And do you want your baby to move through the birth canal and support the baby during that process? You want to move your body. So movement is really helpful for baby to move down. And so going into a squatting position or going on our hands and knees are all really great options for you. You know, lying flat on your back, one, is not going to feel comfortable. You probably won't want to stay there too long. And two, is not productive. So whether we're up and moving, and I call these active laboring, when you're being active, you're on your hands and knees or on your feet, or if you're lying down, say you have an epidural, you would want to recline the table into a semi-recliner so that, again, you're using that gravity aspect and you're leaning forward. So there are many different options you can do and really creative ways. This is why I love the birth sling so much, is because you can really sink into it and totally use gravity, but you're not on your hands and knees or on your feet, right? And it can get hard after so many hours of being on our feet, especially being heavier and as well in labor, right? So we definitely want to preserve our energy as well. That's really big. Some laboring positions are like, you could use a stability ball. And so you can do some hip circles. You can go on it as if you're kind of lunging. So kind of one foot is in front of the ball and you're kind of lunging over top of it. You can spell your name with the ball. And these are really great in early labor, I find, just to kind of get the hips working. Use the ball as much as you can. You can also use the ball and the birth sling simultaneously. And so if you check out the birth sling, it's called the birth sling Instagram, you can see a lot of different examples, or you can, book in a session with me and we'll go over some of those positions. Another great one is sitting on a toilet. So you would actually sit on it backwards. And so if you think of the sphincter law, and when we let go, we're often sitting on a toilet. Have you ever tried peeing standing? It doesn't work, right? So same with a baby, right? When your baby is going down the canal, it's the same pelvic floor that is resisting or allowing that access. And so they did this trial with a group of people, and it's kind of gross, but you would win money if you could go into the middle of a circle and people were all kind of circled around you and you could have a bowel movement. And no one could do it, right? Because of that feeling of safety is really important. And so similar with birth, if you are resisting or holding your pelvic floor, tightening up and not letting baby down, your body is sending signals that I don't feel safe to do this. So relaxing your pelvic floor is really helpful. Regardless, my suggestion is sitting on the toilet backwards, because that's where you really know how to let go of your pelvic floor. And it is very productive for labor. And so what you can do is you can put a pillow on the back of the toilet if you're at home, and as well in the hospital. And make sure it's clean, like you're having a home birth, like clean up your bathroom so it's not like dusty or dirty, and so that you can really like let go and get comfortable there. Another great option is having a shower with a chair. You can have the warm steam on your back and you can sit in a chair, and again, it can simulate that you're sitting on a toilet, but you have the hydrotherapy aspect. You can sit on it backwards, and again, just bring lots of cushions and comfort measures. Like, if feeling uncomfortable, fix it. That's what I suggest. This podcast is called Get Bougie with Birth, so I stand true to that. You can lean on a table, or you can lean on the hospital bed and have a pillow and kind of just, drape your body over it. And then you can sway your hips back and forth. Obviously, there's hands and knees. That's a great one. It's a good one for if I want to massage your back or your partner wants to massage your back. Or we could do the classic double hip squeeze. If you're listening to this and you're not working with me, I definitely recommend you Google the double hip squeeze. And that helps counter pressure your hips, and so it helps relieve pain, and it's so powerful. After so many hours, it definitely can get hard, so I like to throw in a rebozo to replace our hands on the double hip squeeze. But again, if you're booking in with me, we're going to go over all of this in our prenatal appointment, or you can just give it a Google. There'll be like lots of videos. You can have a kneeling lunge, one where your knee's on the ground, make sure you have a pillow underneath there, and your foot's kind of placed wide out, and you can kind of rock back and forth, or you can put your foot up onto a couch or a chair. If you have your one foot up, it's called unilateral. Like, one foot is like a lunge would be a unilateral movement, or like a side lunge. These movements where one foot is kind of adjacent to the other and you're kind of on a diagonal are really great for the baby to get down, and it kind of helps the pelvic floor relax and can really help speed things up. Some people like to, if they want to walk around and they're feeling really energetic or want to speed things up, you can do what they call a curb walk, where one foot's on the curb and one foot's on the ground. That one's better, I find, for early labor, but again, if it works for you, great. Definitely you can do it. If you want to use a peanut ball, you can kind of straddle it on the side if you need some rest. The peanut ball is great in the hospital. They do offer them. I know at Vic General here in Victoria, BC, they have one. Sometimes they do run out or they're being used. So if you want to get bougie about it, you can definitely bring your own and leave it in the car. And same with the Bosu ball. The big circular balls, they do have them, but I have been to some births where they're all being used and what have you. So if that's really important to you and you are a big planner like myself, kind of the type A girly, bring one in the car, have it there for a backup. The Rebozo is another tool I use. I've kind of mentioned it in the other video, but I do suggest, it'd be hard to explain through a podcast, but if you have a scarf lying around, like big long scarf, you don't have to go out and buy a Rebozo. If you do go buy a Rebozo, I do suggest it is a Mexican tradition. So if you're going to buy one, do buy it directly from Mexican artisans. I bought mine on Etsy for about $65. Tie it to the door and hang off of it. You can do belly lifts, hip shakes, hip squeezes, and it's just a tool to help not only you, but your birth partner, and, reserve our energy and potentially your energy as well. So I do highly recommend looking into Rebozo or birth sling. You really want to build up your tools, right? So epidurals, that is a really common pain relief. Epidurals are fantastic when they work perfectly and are on time. I am an advocate for epidurals. I'm also an advocate for unmedicated births. So it's totally up to you, and I suggest you do what feels best for you. I would do you a disservice if I didn't educate you on them and tell you how to work with them instead of against them. So I'm going to share as much as I can about them and teach you how you can still have a really epic birth and move around and work with it and still be attached to an epidural. So positionings, again, you can do the side lying where you recline the table. The table at the hospital. You can't get an epidural at home. Just want to preface that. You have to be at the hospital. and you are hooked up with a IV and so on. So the nurses will prompt these. I can as well if I'm working with you. So you can go on your side lying and put a peanut ball between your knees. Again, you got that unilateral movement and you're in a semi-reclined. You can sit on a ball as well and have your hands kind of close to the table. Depending on the anesthesiologist and your anatomy, you can get epidurals where you're completely numb, or you can get ones that you can move around. And so I've been to ones where usually mama can kind of squat up onto the table. They can get up to go to pee. It just really depends. And to be honest, I don't really know all the research as to why some people get completely numb and some don't. I think there are a couple factors, and I have spoken to an anesthesiologist about this, and so I know that majority should be able to move around, and I think that's great if you still want to have that classic movement-based laboring birth. You can also go into a child's pose on the table. You can, sit up in a semi-reclined position with, instead of side lying, you just are on your back in reclined position with one foot draped over a ball. You can go onto your hands and knees. Just play with it and see what feels good for you. Epidurals, and I'll go over them more specifically, but they work with gravity, right? So you want to switch back and forth. So say if you're lying on your right side, your left leg is actually going to start to get sensation and potentially start to spasm a little bit. And I see a lot of people in postpartum, they get muscle spasms from just those prolonged positions. You can't really feel your muscles, right? So you can get kind of tightened through the hips, and sometimes in more severe cases get little like sciatic nerve compressions and that kind of thing. So you want to switch back and forth so that you don't lose sensation on the one side and then half your body is numb and the other half isn't. So back and forth, I would say every 30, 45 to an hour minutes are great. There are many different ball examples on YouTube using Bosu balls and using a peanut ball together. I would suggest going to take a look on YouTube and see different positionings that people recommend, and maybe screenshotting them, adding them to a album on your phone. And I like to whip them out during a birth, almost like a flashcard. Hey, let's try this. I think giving people variety and options, sometimes we forget them on the spot. I definitely have seen a cool position and then birth comes around and I'm like, oh crap, what was that position? And you just forget. So having a little album, screenshot them. You can even screenshot it off a YouTube video. That's what I do for my clients, and get some variety and use those during your birth. Some other great ones are using the birthing bar there's a bar that goes over the hospital bed, and so you can either tie a scarf or the rebozo, or you can lean your hands off of it and kind of pull or traction off of it to give yourself some counter pressure. That is really great. Okay. I've talked about laboring positions. I want to kind of go into birthing positions, so as you're pushing. So I just want to preface that any birthing position that the mom feels safe in, comfortable in, baby's doing well, is a good position. So if that means going on your back is feeling the best and you're doing great and you're feeling strong, power to you. I'm going to give you a little bit of information on it so that you can make an informed decision if that's what you want to do. But typically, birthing on your back is considered, I'm putting air quote, the worst position. And I'm going to explain why. I've been in births where people are in this position, and that works great for them, and minimal tearing, and if not none, and that was great for them. It's very specific to people, but in general, it's not the most advantageous. So the hips are the most closed off when you're in your back. When your hips are wide open, believe it or not, this actually further closes the hips. And you have to see the anatomy to really understand this. And I do suggest you look up, it's called Kiko hips. Kiko, yes, Kiko, or yes, believe it's called Kiko hips, like Kiko. And so if your knees are actually knocked together, the hips actually open, versus if your knees are wide apart, almost like in a sumo position, your hips are actually closed. And you can see this from an anatomy example. I do show a video to my clients, but yeah, so on your back with your legs wide open is great for the people who are potentially catching the baby because they can see what's going on, but it's not great for baby and mama. Historically, very few women gave birth on their backs. The history of like birthing on your back is actually kind of weird and gross. It started, I think, with like some king who was like a voyeur kind of thing and would want to watch women giving birth, and so the only way he could see was if they went on the back. And I'm not making this stuff up. It is a lot of, it's very well known, that type of history within the birthing community. So it's very strange, and you know, some things just kind of stick. Also, the birth canal is in J shape, and so lying on your back, you have to push your baby up and out instead of down and out. And so a great example would be hands and knees for the opposite. You have a birth gate, and so in this position, the birth gate is closed. The sacrum is part of the gate, so your tailbone, and it moves up and out to allow the baby to pass down. And so when you're lying on your back, it actually restricts this movement. So this is all of the information I really have on it. I would say, again, the best position for a birthing person is the one that they feel most comfortable with. So take that and decide for yourself. You know, I think in the birth you can advocate, you don't have to ask to move around. You can do essentially what you want. If you want to go on your side lying, if you want to stand up, you can do it. You don't have to ask permission. And the nurses that I work with are really excited to see mom try different ones, and you know, they're there to help you, and they'll totally be stoked if you try different things for yourself. You don't need to ask permission. So let's move on to our next video. I'll end it here. Hopefully you found that helpful, and yeah, we'll connect in the next video.